The statistic that caught my eye is that compute demand, particularly from agentic and reasoning, is 100x today, 100x what it was 1 year ago. And to many people, that doesn't actually mean anything. But the way that it was explained to me by Nvidia is that they just counted all the tokens, right? In a tokenization context, you basically take a token, 3 bytes of data, and you say, okay, what are our companies beyond the hyperscalers doing right now? Today, it's 100x more than it was a year ago. How do you model that? I mean, it's a very, very difficult forward-looking metric.
So there's 2 ways to do that. So, and by the way, there is a misunderstanding, because it's complex, right? That's why people struggle. So one part of my team tests models. So, what they try to find out is how good a model can behave. And they found that the reasoning models behave better. The reason why they behave better is that extra tokens, is the extra computing. By being able to, in essence, think, they actually end up getting a better result. So my team got very excellent results from that. But I have a different part of my team that actually tries to understand exactly how many GPUs the different companies bought. So my team in China was able to...
You're going to bring us to DeepSeek, aren't you?
Yes, I'll bring it to DeepSeek, because my team in China found out that DeepSeek bought a huge amount of GPUs. So imagine then they release, we have given that information to our clients, they release their paper, and in their paper they say, we don't use many GPUs for training. So my clients immediately came in, they said, Vlad, why did you tell us they bought so many GPUs? And I said, well, they did. I have the receipts. And we know now that they bought them because their inference is so compute intensive, because their inference uses, as you said, 100x more tokens than a traditional knowledge model. But that's a good thing for us. It's actually better for us to train quickly and simply and have a better output through more tokens, through more reasoning. People are, especially the environmentally conscious people, which we all should be, are very concerned about that extra tokenization during the inference stage. But actually, if you can get the right answer once with one question, that stops you from having to prompt many times. You might have got a good answer from ChatGPT,
right,
but you would have needed to ask it 100 questions. So you're doing the reasoning for it. Now, if you use a reasoning model with what they call agentic AI, you end up having the right answer straight away.
This is the core of Jensen Huang's argument, right? If you were at GTC in 2022, 2023, 2024 maybe, the fixation was on H100 and training, the next frontier model. But the world's very different now. I think Nvidia's really focused on its enterprise customers. What Jensen Huang did outline was a roadmap, 4 years and 4 generations worth of hardware. Electronics companies, consumer electronics, technology companies, they don't do that. They don't say, here's what I'm doing this year, all the way through to 2027. What did you make of that?
I disagree that electronics companies don't share their roadmap. I'll be honest, because I think if you look at AMD, they share their roadmap pretty broadly. I think Lisa is very transparent. I come from Intel. At Intel, we've always shared our roadmap pretty broadly. Well, maybe not. In the last few years have been a bit shaky.
Well, there's a difference between sharing a roadmap and executing on it, isn't there?
It is a very big difference. I think what's amazing about Nvidia is an extreme laser focus and this incredible culture, and they understand the hardware stack, they understand their software stack, they understand the services, they have a strategy, and they understand that the world is getting tokenized. So they're focused on that. They're laser focused on how do we make the most efficient token processing engine.
The analogy that Jensen Huang gave was Louis Vuitton bags. So for what it's worth, he argued Louis Vuitton comes out with its 2025 bag, but at the same day, it doesn't tell you what it's going to be doing in 2028 or 2029. Whether you agree with that analogy or not remains to be seen. What is different is you get a sense that Nvidia's moved beyond the hyperscalers. The demand side of that equation, what do you see?
So I do think that, so let me just touch on enterprises and the roadmap for a second. Enterprises need predictability, and they like it. So, and actually, they've been looking, ever since Intel stopped delivering, they've been looking for more partners to be honest, to give them a roadmap, to explain things, and to then deliver. So I think it's actually the best way to address the enterprise.
Does it protect the enterprise's ability to commit spending if they know what in 4 years' time the technology bar will be?
It does. In my discussion with Jensen, that's exactly what we got into. This protection of enterprise spend, this guarantee, because the investments these days are huge. but it also helps to create an ecosystem. So what you need to make it in the enterprise is you need an ecosystem. So over 70% of IT is purchased through partners, through channel partners, but in the enterprise, if you zoom into just the enterprise, it's virtually every transaction. So you really need to have trust in partners. You need to have trust that there'll be people who will help you to have a hardware ecosystem. Nvidia may make a GPU, but they work with the cooling vendors on the exact specification of how the coat plate that will cool it will look like. That's very impressive, right? So then when you go to the software layer, you want to get the developers behind you. And on top of developers, you want also users that might not be experts. So by having both a language, by having a platform, by having models, that means that the different level of skills, people can work with you. And then you need to have a services layer. Some enterprises like to do stuff in-house. Other enterprises like to have a partner. And
Vlad, we were short on time, and I've got to mention Quantum Day. That's why we're here in this room. Nvidia does not make quantum computers.
Yes.
We're having Quantum Day. How do you approach it?
So I think, big speculation on quantum computing. When is it coming? So I'll just tell you one very quick story. ARM CPUs, right? ARM CPUs are now a really big part of the ecosystem. We use it. Nvidia has them. Amazon has them. Many people have them. But when the first kind of data center ARM CPU was launched in about 2011, 2013, I was at Intel and we were very worried about it. But at the time, it lacked performance. So it took another 5 years for performance to happen. But then it lacked software ecosystem, it lacked programmability, it lacked libraries, and it lacked, being able to use enterprise software out of the box. So it took another 5 years, huge investment from Amazon, actually, if we're honest, for code to be rewritten to work. So we're now in the place where ARM was in 2011. So I think that we need at least another 5 years for the hardware to get to a place where it's highly reliable, but then the programmability of it, how easy it can be popularized, that's the difficulty. So in many ways, there might be truth behind everyone's sayings. Pat Gelsinger thinks it's going to take 5 years. For the hardware, yes, but I think Jensen thinks about it very practically. It takes longer for the programmability.
And NVIDIA's argument would be their AI supercomputer, separate technology, can help in the development. Vlad Galabov of Omdia, really great to catch up here in San Jose.